What do you think, Scott? Okay.
We'll get slides.
All right.
I'm doing the best I can.
Well, I can go ahead and try and get started here. I want to thank Suzanne for the introduction and for the invitation, but really most importantly, all of you for your attendance. It's quite humbling to see this many people standing in a room or sitting in a room watching me stand up here. If I would have ever thought when I headed to graduate school that I would do something like this, I probably wouldn't have believed you. I really want to keep it casual tonight, so feel free at any point to ask questions or ask for clarification, which you might need. How many of you are new to the Appetite for Life series? Oh, great! I'm happy to see a lot of hands. So you won't have anything to compare it to. We're good. Cool. Well, then I'll just wait a second. How many of you have participated in a study at the research campus? Even better to see that many hands. How many of you have participated in a study in my lab, the Cheatham Nutrition and Cognition lab? Are you some of our Berry participants, maybe? Well, you might hear a little bit about that tonight. Look at that. Okay. Okay. I won't hold mine, but other people can if they want to try. Okay. All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So tonight, I want to start by defining cognition so that we're all on the same page. And then I'll outline how the brain develops across the lifespan. Then we'll discuss aging and the disease of aging, followed by a discussion of how nutrition can help. Then I'll summarize, and we'll have a little bit of time for discussion. So let's go ahead and get started. So what is cognition? Sigelman and Ryder define it as the activity of knowing and the process through which knowledge is acquired and problems are solved. Cognition involves many processes such as perception, attention, memory, reasoning, and problem solving, among many others. So what do all these have in common? They all rely on the brain. The brain develops during gestation, shown here at 25 weeks, 30 weeks, and 33 weeks. And then by birth, labeled here as term, it looks almost like the adult brain, with the exception of some gyrification. And that's the folds that we see between the term brain here and adult. So the brain starts from a single cell to develop into a smooth collection of cells. But then, within the confines of our skulls, it begins to fold. Also, during postnatal development, connections are being made, and environmental input is processed and then coded by our neurons. Those are the cells that make up our brain. The environment plays a huge part in brain development. This chart shows the progression of motor development. Okay, so I see some of the faces. Why are we looking at a chart of motor development? We're talking about the brain. Well, motor development determines input to our brains. A newborn, here at the top left, has a limited line of sight. As you move along the chart here, you'll see that movement increases. Think about how a baby's access to visual information increases and how her motion through the environment increases the number of things that she encounters from which she can learn. What can she see lying on her stomach is going to be very different than what she can see when she is able to start walking through her world. So without movement, cognitive development is limited. And the brain is certainly developing and changing throughout this time period to accommodate the new activity and knowledge. Our world is riddled with things that result in brain development and refinement. Cognitive development starts with learning about language and facial expressions with our caregivers. Motor development also requires support. The mouth is an important source of information, and toys are used for learning. And soon, peers become a source of important learning, and that remains throughout our entire lifespan. Overall, we know that the interaction with one's physical and social environments is essential for cognitive development And I want you all to keep this in mind because we're going to come back to this throughout the talk. But development does not stop in our early years or even during our elementary years. This chart outlines brain development from 5 through 22 years of age. Cognitive abilities, those called executive functions, develop during this period. So if you think that teenagers have limited impulse control, and I know my parents are in the audience, so don't tell anybody any stories about me. If you think they have your poor impulse control, you're probably right. It's because this change is going on. The brain organizes and is reorganizing during adolescence. And while this is happening, decision-making becomes affected. So as you can see, brain development is not just something that happens to fetuses and babies. It's a lifelong process. But we are here tonight to talk about a thing called aging. Specifically, we'll be discussing how our brains age. When does it happen? Who does it impact? Why does it occur? How does it occur? What can we do to slow it down? And what can we do about it when it happens? So I want to invite the room to think about the information in today's talk from two perspectives. First, I want you to think about what preventative measures you can make for the future, especially the younger crowd. What habits can you create now to maximize your future outcomes? Second, I want you to think about what you can do now to maximize your future given the history that you've already experienced. The older crowd, what existing factors from your life course may be impacting you as you age? And what can you do today to help correct for the past? First, why should we all be concerned with aging? Maybe some of you are thinking, well, I'll just deal with it when it happens to me, right? Well, in 2014, the proportion of the U.S. population over the age of 65 was about 13%. That's 1 in 8 individuals. By 2035, it will be greater than it has been in our history, as it approaches about 20% of the population. That's just 1 in 5. Sorry, I meant 1 in 8 earlier. To put that in perspective, that's an increase approximately equal to the population of Florida, which might be a little ironic because many of them are probably going to be retiring there, right? This shift will have a profound impact on the United States infrastructure and really everyone's lifestyles. The rise in healthcare needs and cost alone produce a significant burden. Therefore, learning to recognize aging early and developing habits that stave off age-related decline could help improve everyone's lives. So what does aging look like? Comparison of 2 MRI scans in a healthy 25-year-old compared to an 80-year-old that's experiencing some cognitive losses. The difference between these two brains can be quite shocking. The owner of this older brain is experiencing cognitive issues, as you might imagine. So why does this happen to our brains? Decreasing activity in the brain is one of the hallmarks of aging. As this chart shows, as the activity of the brain decreases with age, so does brain matter. The brain actually shrinks in line with a lack of neural activity occurring across time. You've heard the old saying, what you don't use, you lose. Well, in this case, it might be true. Activity declines throughout the brain and across many, if not all, of its individual parts and systems. But some areas, such as our frontal lobes, here at the front of the head, areas that help us with higher order processing, and our hippocampus, the area attributed to memory function, here in the temporal lobes, have been shown to be affected at a higher rate than other brain areas. So what's going on in the aging brain? When compared to a young brain, the aging brain has fewer brain cells and fewer connections. These are worse when the brain is not being used or when the person is depressed. The changes in the brain lead to a cascade of events, one of which is issues with the production of energy. There is also impaired electrical activity in the brain, which is most likely related to damage seen in axons and myelin. Axons are the projections from the center of our neurons. They're kind of the arms that reach out to connect to other neurons to send information between them. And myelin is this fatty layer that surrounds our axons that speeds up that sending of the signal. It makes the communication a little bit faster. So the loss of those axons means fewer connections to be sending information, and loss of myelin means that the information that's being sent is going to be sent slower. And of course, inflammation can be prominent in the brain. As a result of the sum of all of these changes, we also see changes in behavior that most often manifest in cognitive issues. So here's a good illustration of what happens with aging. This graph shows performance on a number of cognitive assessments across 7 decades of life, from our 20s through to our 80s. As you can see, across these many years, knowledge continues to grow. But other aspects of cognition begin to fall. The red lines are knowledge-based, and you can see across adult years, they stay pretty stable. They don't really show a lot of decline. The green lines are speed of processing. And speed of processing is simply a measure of how quickly neurons can communicate. As you can see by the green lines, speed of processing drops drastically across the adult years. The gray lines are for working memory. Working memory is the memory that you use to hold something in mind while you work with it. Like keeping an address in mind as you drive down the street looking for your friend's house. Working memory declines also. And finally, the blue lines are aspects of long-term memory, which is how well you might remember this talk next week. I'm sure everybody will remember it. It's just that exciting. Nobody's falling asleep yet, so. Working memory also declines with age. So performance declines with increasing age for things like speed of processing, working memory, and long-term memory. Thus, symptoms of typical aging might include difficulty recalling a word or a name, or difficulty remembering verbal instructions that might have been given to you. Overall speed of processing, or time to process and respond to a task might slow. And the person may experience difficulty remembering what happened a few days ago. How can we tell if aging is proceeding typically or if dementia is setting in, however? Small slips throughout the day can happen to anyone. Who here has forgotten the date or thought that it was Monday when it was really Wednesday? Well, as a graduate student, it happens to me, well, every day. I really don't remember, right? But that's okay. Making a bad decision every once in a while is not a big deal. But showing poor judgment in all aspects of life could be a problem. Forgetting what day it is momentarily, not an issue. But once you lose track of the day, or maybe if you've lost track of the entire month, this could indicate a problem. Another example of sometimes forgetting which word to use. But that's probably normal, and that's perfectly okay. But if you have difficulty carrying on a conversation on a regular basis, again, that could be an example of something to talk to your doctor about. You probably get the picture, though. Typical aging is manageable. Atypical aging involves something more and must be addressed by, at minimum, constant monitoring of the individual. I'll let you think on this. Oh, my talk's over. I thought you guys were probably going to... Oh. So I do. I imagine this is now your question. You're thinking, wait, I don't want this to happen to me. What can I do? Well, let's explore some options. Our lives are comprised of many different dimensions. Probably not surprisingly, they all tie into our brain health. To keep our brains healthy, we must ensure that we have healthy social lives, that we are attending to our emotional health, like not holding on to negativity and minimizing stress. And we must maintain our cognitive health by continually challenging our brains. But the aspects that tie all this together are physical health. You must take care of your body, or your social, emotional, and cognitive health will likely suffer. So exercise is important. And you must attend to your nutritional health. Nutrition fuels the body and the brain. If one keeps all of these pieces in optimal shape, you are guaranteed a better life. So to recap, there are many steps we can take to enhance our brain health, such as physical exercise and mental exercise. We can do things that help our daily memory function. Getting a good night's sleep, for example. And adding a daily challenge to our routine, such as a word find or a crossword puzzle. We can do things that protect our long-term brain health. Making sure that we're socializing, hanging out with our friends, and having that time to socialize is incredibly important for our brain health. Making sure that we're addressing emotions as they arise and keeping our stress to a minimum. So don't go to graduate school. But importantly, and the reason we're all here today, we need to eat well. Nutrition is key to optimizing all of these dimensions. If you've never considered nutrition as important to brain function, I want everyone to consider this. If you own a fancy sports car, and I thought I saw a few outside if anybody's looking to give a ride later, would you put bad gas in it? Would you forget to change the oil? No, of course not. So why, when gifted with a thing such as marvelous as our brains, do we find people fueling their bodies with nasty, non-nutritional foods? Hopefully the healthful trend that we're experiencing now in the United States will continue. So let's talk about a few ways that nutrition works in our brains. There's a theory that, at least in part, aging is a byproduct of normal metabolism. That's normal living. Approximately 3% of the oxygen atoms used by the cell become reactive oxygen species. Reactive oxygen species oxidize and cause damage. How? Reactive oxygen species are a type of free radical. Free radicals accumulate in the body over time. So what is a free radical? It is a chemical compound that is missing an electron. They don't like being in this state. They're missing their friend. So they scavenge cells for another electron to steal someone else's friend. And this causes damage to the proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids in our cells, which can alter the function of the cell, or worse, render it useless. In the brain, oxidation increases cell death, and inflammation exacerbates the effects of aging. In the body, sources of free radicals include things such as aerobic respiration, slow metabolism, and you guessed it, inflammation. Our environment has plenty to offer in the way of free radicals. Also with things such as pollution, sunlight, smoking, alcohol consumption, and even X-rays causing these free radicals. So with free radicals being so prevalent, and reactive oxygen species being a byproduct of well living, what are we going to do to stop them? Well, luckily we have such things called antioxidants. Antioxidants have an extra electron, and so when free radicals go scavenging to steal that electron, they can easily get it from an antioxidant. So antioxidants are compounds that reverse oxidation by neutralizing damaging free radicals. Where do you find antioxidants? In fruits and vegetables, of course. Your mom's been telling you that since you were a kid. Some nutrients that we discussed tonight have antioxidant properties, but those listed here do as well. Vitamin C and E, beta-carotene, and selenium all work as antioxidants. In order to keep your body clear of free radicals, you need to consume enough antioxidant foods to overcome them. Importantly for us tonight, research has shown that diets high in antioxidants result in lower risk for many diseases of aging, such as cancer, heart disease, stroke, cataracts, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, and even arthritis. And the prescription is clear and simple. Who has a guess? Eat more fruits and vegetables. Doesn't this look lovely? Wouldn't this just be great? Of course, if possible, you want to try and eat organic. Otherwise, the chemicals used to grow the food could counteract the antioxidants. We will hear as we go about other antioxidant activities relative to food and the brain. So let's get started. Let's move on to the brain. Food has some amazing roles in the brain. Most importantly, food is a source of glucose, which is the main fuel for the brain. Food also provides the pieces needed to build neurons and connections. Examples might be choline and fatty acids. From constituents of food, neurotransmitters are produced, and amino acids from food work with genetics to build proteins. Some nutrients are methyl donors. Some, like DHA, improve plasticity, and others reduce inflammation. And this is not a complete list. Suffice to say that nutrition is central to brain function. It can be overwhelming to figure out how to eat well. The easiest method I've found is to simply eat a rainbow of foods. That's it. To ensure that you are getting all the nutrition that you need, just eat as many colors of food as you can. Food dye doesn't count, okay? Each color actually indicates a different bioactive that is needed in your body. So, easy, yes? We can all go home. We're good. We figured it out. Well, we'll go ahead and move to discussion of a few specific nutrients. But before we do that, I want to discuss how nutrients are delivered to the brain and the impact that that might have. So first, how we get those nutrients from the stomach to the brain. Of course, your bloodstream does that, right? So it follows then that we need to ensure that the circulatory system is up and running well. There's a strong link between brain and heart health. 20 to 25% of our blood goes to our head. The brain is less than 1% of our total body weight, our total body mass, yet it uses 20% of the food and oxygen in our blood. Heart disease and high blood pressure can lead to stroke and blood vessel changes that relate to dementia. So how do we reduce our risk? Control cholesterol and high blood pressure. Make sure that we get enough exercise. Eat healthy foods. You guys are tired of hearing me say that already. Quit smoking and limit our use of alcohol. But low to moderate amounts may even be protective, and we can talk about that later. You've probably heard that one should consume good fats to improve cardiovascular health. Fatty acids found in fish have been shown to be important not only for cardiac function, but also for our brain function. In young women, fatty acids such as DHA are important for building a baby's brain. In older women and men, it supports the vasculature system and brain. DHA has a role in cognitive abilities. It improves the ability of the neurons to move information from one to the next. So speed of processing, working memory, and long-term memory can all be helped by DHA. DHA can be found in eggs, meat that comes from grass-fed animals, fish that are oily, and many supplemented foods in the United States. 2 to 3 servings of these DHA-rich foods a week is thought to be plenty, but there is no recommended amount at this time. DHA is also good for vision. And I want to talk about this for a minute as it illustrates the synergy that we see between some nutrients. This is the picture of an eye. Those little yellow dots are damage on the fovea from too much blue light, just everyday light coming into our eyes. So this is how we see typically. And this is how a person who's with those little yellow dot areas of damage sees. Macular degeneration occurs in older folks, but it can be prevented and sometimes even reversed with a nutrient called lutein. Lutein is a carotenoid. It's found in green leafy vegetables like spinach and kale. It is essential. This means that it has to be acquired from our environment. The body cannot produce this nutrient itself. Lutein is deposited directly in the retina and has antioxidant properties that make it important to the retina and to the brain. If you consume about the equivalent of 1 cup of steamed kale or spinach every day, you will meet your lutein needs. Importantly, lutein works in the brain to improve speed of processing. When combined with DHA, it is very powerful, as DHA is easily oxidized, and lutein, as I said, is an antioxidant. So together, they are a powerful couple. So I know you probably don't want to see a bunch of data, but just bear with me for a second. I think these could be pretty easy to decipher. Okay, the blue bars are control participants. They had no supplementation of DHA or lutein. The red had just DHA. The green had lutein, these two. And the purple were supplemented with both lutein and DHA. In the test of verbal cognition, here, you can see that all manner of supplementation helped. All three of the supplemented groups performed significantly better than those who didn't have any supplementation. What is important to note is that on the delayed recall task over here, DHA had no effect. It didn't even do well enough to get a bar. We just said, no, you don't even get a bar, right? And lutein was not different from the control. These two were not significantly different on a statistical level. But the two of them together, both DHA and lutein together, did show a significant difference between the control group. So nutrients work together, and this should not be surprising. Nutrients do not appear in nature alone. They appear in foods that have multiple nutrients and other compounds. The reason for this is the nutrients work together towards a common goal. We see this time and time again. Okay, so let's quickly run through a few more nutrients that are important in aging gracefully. I already mentioned how important glucose is. It's a key source of energy and has a regulation system in the body that uses insulin to control sugar levels. Glucose is obtained from all foods, pretty much, and it is used for thinking, but it can be used up quite quickly during concentrated mental activity. So maybe I was allowed to eat that Snickers. I don't know. Folate, you've probably heard of in relation to its need during pregnancy. Women of childbearing age need folate to ensure that their babies have properly developed central nervous systems. You may not be aware that at an individual level, folate deficiency will disrupt cognitive abilities. In older adults, it can help with osteoporosis and dementia. Folate can be found in all leafy greens, black-eyed peas, beans, and many other vegetables, and even some fruits. Adults should eat the equivalent of 1 cup of spinach and about 3 ounces of beef a day. Pregnant women would need to get about double that to get their level of folate they require. Many of you have also probably heard about vitamin B12. B12 deficiency has been associated with psychiatric disorders, cognitive decline, and has recently been shown to have a strong relation to the development of Alzheimer's disease. B12 is involved in the metabolism of fatty acids and their synthesis, or in the synthesis or creation of DNA. It is naturally produced by bacteria and archaea, so it can be found in meat and eggs due to their breakdown and digestion of foods so that our bodies can use them. This is called a symbiotic relationship, or symbiosis. Beef livers and clams are 2 of the best sources for B12, but a few eggs and a glass of milk could also do the trick. That's pretty much my breakfast every morning. I had no idea, though. Because of this symbiosis, however, B12 is not found in plant foods, so vegetarians and vegans have an increased risk of deficiency. Zinc is not a nutrient that is talked about all that much, but is important for genetic activity and regulating glucose. It's important to older folks whose sensors are not as sharp anymore as well, because it supports smell and taste. And of course, it's good to fight off viruses. Recommended daily dosage depends on the intended use. Typically 2 to 3 servings of these foods a day work. If you're catching a cold, you may want slightly more. And finally, green tea. Green tea contains antioxidants that will support all the nutrients that are easily oxidized, as well as regulating the stress hormone, cortisol. So it supports cardiovascular health and possibly even prevents Alzheimer's. Now, you probably know this campus exists to study how we can ameliorate the progression of disease across the lifespan using nutrition. So it follows that there might be some research going on, right? And of course, there is. In what follows, I will just briefly tell you the results of a trial conducted to explore whether eating blueberries can help with mild cognitive decline. This trial was the first collaborative effort on campus. It was conducted by scientists at UNC Chapel Hill and NC State. Some of you may have heard of it. This was called the Berry Study, and I loved the acronym. It stood for Blueberries, Exciting Research Relevant to You. In the study, participants 65 to 79 were put in groups based on whether they were experiencing mild cognitive decline, as determined by the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, or as we like to call it, the MOCA. And it's illustrated in part here. The MOCA consists of 8 sections that test recall memory, executive function, attention, orientation, abstraction, visual spatial skills, and naming. It has been standardized and validated, and mild cognitive decline in this study was defined as 1.5 standard deviations below the aged norm. Participants were divided randomly into 2 groups. One ate the equivalent of 2 cups of blueberries a day for 6 months, and the other took a placebo. The berries were freeze-dried and pulverized into a powder. The placebo was just a sugar powder, basically. There was a third group. These were individuals who were not experiencing any decline whatsoever. We referred to these as the reference group. Participants were also tested on a computerized cognition test. This is the Cambridge Neuropsychological Test Automated Battery, or much easier to say, CANTAB. This had paired associates learning, reaction time, spatial working memory, and a rapid visual information processing task. And participants also had their brain activity recorded while we did some other cognitive tests. Here's a picture of one of our adult participants wearing an ERP net. Everybody say, oh, right? Aww. Just like a model. I swear, just a participant, just, hanging out, right? Event-related potentials, or ERP, is one of the ways we study brain activity in our lab. Using ERP, we record electrical signals from the brain. We call these waveforms, sort of like a tape recorder for brain activity. With ERP, we can identify factors such as processing speed and memory. So the results of the berry study indicated that blueberries were able to slow the decline of cognitive abilities. However, this effect was more evident in men than it was in women. In women, cognitive decline slowed whether they were on placebo or on blueberry. We think that as women, they benefited from the social interaction of coming into the lab. Right? I'm glad I didn't even have to make the joke. Okay. No idea what that could be. And so no matter which powder the women were on, they had a benefit. On the last test of quite honestly, a very grueling testing session, and you could ask, if you have any friends that you know participated in the study, you could ask them about it. Most of them were very good sports about it, to be honest. The CANTAB Rapid Visual Information task was this last test. The placebo group showed slower processing speed, but the blueberry supplemented group showed quicker processing. In fact, the blueberry group's speed of processing performance was similar, if not slightly better, than the reference group. That's the group that was not experiencing any cognitive decline at the beginning of the study. In fact, blueberry group showed a net improvement in processing speed of about 80 milliseconds when compared to the placebo group. I know 80 milliseconds might not seem like a lot, but I want to point out that to the brain, this is quite a big change. For reference, it takes 13 milliseconds for your brain to see an image. That is, it only takes 13 milliseconds for information that hits your retina in your eye to move through the optic nerve all the way to the back of your head to be processed in the occipital lobe here in the back, before then being sent to the temporal lobes on the sides and the parietal lobe on the top for further processing. Certainly, given that information, we can agree that 80 milliseconds is a lot of time in neuron terms. So these findings from the berry study confirmed that berries are important for brain health.
Just for men?
Yeah. No, this was actually true in both the men and the women. The MOCA changes, the change in the actual, our global measure, cognitive decline, were different between the two sexes. Yeah. So what's our main conclusion tonight? Aging can be helped and maybe even prevented with good nutrition. As we've seen, as we've discussed, there's a lot of different factors that feed into this, right? Just an overall nutritious diet can be incredibly helpful. Maybe in getting individual nutrients in your diet could help you out. It's going to be different for each individual. So we see both positive and negative influences throughout our lives. At the end of the day, things such as mental activity, physical activity, and social stimulation can stave off aging. In this chart here, we see all the way from prenatal, and they've got it all the way through older adulthood. And it might be a little bit difficult to see, but I want to point out a few examples. So these things in red, things like stress, might be a negative impact on our cognitive function. And those might be inevitable across our life. But we also have things like resisting peer pressure or getting enough social engagement that have been shown to be positive for our brain function, right? So we have to keep in mind that many exposures throughout our lives are not independent or maybe interlinked chains of events. For example, education and level of health behaviors, or similarly the impact of our socioeconomic status on the ability to afford nutritious foods. The cumulative effect of poor lifestyle can be deadly. Whereas the cumulative effects of good nutrition and exercise across your life can net you a long and healthy life. So how can diet help our brains? Even though there's no scientifically proven brain diet, research shows that you can increase your chances of maintaining a healthy brain well into old age if you add good foods. Foods such as wild salmon, blueberries, avocados, and things like nuts and seeds. These nutritional recommendations promote overall optimal health. And good nutrition can reduce the risk of heart disease and diabetes. Additionally, physical activity may reduce a number of other factors. So it reduces diabetes, heart disease, depression, and even stroke. Being physically fit prevents falls. Staying physically fit means that we're more capable to go out and do more things. So it may not be just the exercise that you're getting from going on a hike. It may be meeting up with your friends on that hike, getting the social interaction that's required. And just like when we were talking in the beginning about the things that our baby was seeing, the things that she was seeing, that's still true for us as we get older. The things, getting out and getting physical exercise, going out and seeing, taking a hike through the mountains, getting those experiences, that's engaging our brains and keeping our brains healthy. So as promised, we come back to this idea. Just as in the beginning, it was important to have physical and social interaction with our environment, in older age, it is equally important. Not for the development of cognition, but rather for the retention of cognitive abilities. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. I'd like to also thank my advisor, Dr. Cheatham. She's been stuck standing in the corner all night. Everybody give her a round of applause, please. And a big thank you to my Cheatham Lab colleagues for putting up with me while I'm doing all of this and preparing this presentation. Both Thomas Jackson in the back and Andrea Armour, who is, I think she got lucky and got out of it, gets to be at home with her daughter. And thanks to them for their support. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and take some questions. I think we left some time. Yeah, go ahead.
For that study with the DHA and the routine, they use supplements or food sources? It looked like supplements.
Yeah, I'm not positive, but I do believe that they were using supplementation in that study. Right, Dr. Okay. That's a great question. Yeah, in the back.
I have a question about that as well, and this may not be a smart question. Is it important to eat those two together? Or if you get your egg in the morning,
Yeah.
Even at the same time.
I don't know what she said. Do you want to answer that? Oh, yeah. So yeah, the second one there. You want to make sure that you're that. I'm sorry. Yeah. I mean, it's the best thing you could do is try to eat those together. But I mean, but having both of them is going to be a good idea. Getting both of them is better than neither, right? But getting them together in a food, finding a food that's high in both of these things, so-called nutritious foods, is probably a good idea. Yeah.
You know, this might seem silly to most people here, but I don't feel I could eat all of these foods in a day. I mean, it's an awful lot
Yeah.
to eat.
Right.
So, could you have a really great multivitamin and take a fish oil tablet, or is that just not?
Yeah. And so I think that is a great question, and a question that I think about often. And some scientists at the research campus, that is probably a big point of contention and a little bit of debate, because not all supplements are created equal. And some might tell you that some supplements are completely useless. While some supplements may actually work and may become what we call bioactive. So to answer your question, it might be okay to get them from some supplements. You want to make sure that they're a good supplement. But the best thing that we can do is try to make sure that we're getting nutrient-dense foods. So find foods that are going to have all the nutrients that you're trying to get. So then you don't have to eat as much food. You're just trying to maximize the nutrients that you're getting from eating specific foods. Yeah. Yeah. Right. But I would love to. But right, it might get a little expensive. Yeah, over here.
Mediterranean diet helpful to lose weight?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm not fully versed on the Mediterranean diet, and I think it actually is a talk coming up, the next one. Yeah, but yes, absolutely. The different aspects of the Mediterranean diet, particularly some of the antioxidant effects of foods that tend to be part of the Mediterranean diet, have a great impact. Yeah, right here in the middle. So do the blueberries have to be wild? Yeah. So there is going to be a difference between the species or the type of blueberry. So in the blueberry study here, they were wild Maine blueberries, and those have been shown. So do we have any food scientists or any NC State people here? Well, I know that there's been next door they do a lot of work to look at, the difference between just different strains or different species. And in this study, it was a wild blueberry. Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
What about Prevagen and jellyfish? Does that have anything to do with the brain?
Oh, that's not something I've heard of. Jellyfish?
Yeah, it's advertised as to help your brain to
Well, I'd have to look. You said Prevagen and jellyfish. I'd have to look into that. I'm really not quite sure. In the blue here. Oh, see, now if you meet me back at hypothetically, now that be great? Maybe we could figure out how to market that. It could maybe fund my dissertation or something. It'd be fun. No. we should get talking to somebody. Yes, Suzanne. Yeah. That's probably the best way to do it, right? Is to create a meal that has everything in it. My morning omelet with my spinach with my blueberries on the side that's a pretty regular thing, right? Yeah. Suzanne.
I have a question about tea, specifically mentioned green tea.
Uh-huh.
Does black tea not have the same antioxidants?
No, I don't know off the top of my head. That's a really great question. I want to. My gut reaction is to say no. Yeah. So. Uh-huh.
It's processed differently, and you'll get different from the black and rhubarb or the green tea.
Okay. Okay.
Powdered matcha, which is
Uh-huh.
green tea and stuff like that.
So Suzanne's question was maybe the difference between green tea and black teas. And I think what we've discovered is, I mean, they're coming from the same place. But it's how much they're processed, and those antioxidant effects aren't quite as strong once you process them a little bit more. Yeah. Here?
Yeah, and the white teas are the same. But it depends on whether you cold brew them or hot brew
Okay.
them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
The black tea definitely has a significantly lower form of antioxidants.
Okay.
My question is, are you or is there any proposal to do any studies on getting these nutrients from a plant-based versus an animal-based diet?
Now, not currently at the research campus, unless somebody's got some money and wants to let me take that one on. I'd be happy to. I don't know if you're offering. No, there are certainly studies that are ongoing doing that, but we don't currently have any going on here. It's the difference in what to kind of go off of your question.
Lutein, okay, to get the same amount of lutein from a cup of spinach, you'd have to eat 10 eggs.
Oh yeah.
That's the difference in plant-based versus the animal-based.
Yeah, absolutely. But some nutrients are going to. So his question here was: are we doing any studies to compare getting nutrients from plant-based versus animal-based sources? And I think just to go off of that question, there's certainly going to be a difference depending on what nutrient that we're looking at. So some nutrients are going to be much easier to get from an animal-based source, whereas others are certainly we need to get them from a plant-based source. So I mean, we're going to have a hard time getting the antioxidant effects from an animal source, right? But one of the examples today, we're saying that vegetarians are going to have a hard time getting B12. So it's really going to depend on exactly what type of supplementation we're looking at doing, and in combination, and how we can do that. That's a great question.
There are some research, I just wanted to have a comment. There are some researchers suggesting that a low carbohydrate diet would be beneficial for brain health, and about 100 grams a day. Not a ketogenic diet, but a lower carbohydrate, a very nutrient-dense carbohydrates. And I just think
Trying to decide how much of a personal opinion I can throw at that one. I think that a low carbohydrate diet is not a bad idea. Nutrient dense foods, you don't have to have high carbohydrates to get the nutrients that you need. A ketogenic diet is probably not recommended. But certainly low in carbs and high in other nutrient density may very well be a good idea. A lower calorie diet has been shown to be helpful in cognitive aging to increase neurogenesis, the growth of brain cells. Here. Well, so the Let Us Eat Cafe in the NRI is always open and welcome. Come hang out. You might catch me walking through. I'll happily stop and procrastinate from doing graduate school work, so you just let me know. Yeah.
You mentioned the wine earlier.
Oh. Well, I mean, we can just have as much as we want, right? No. I mean, low to moderate amounts of alcohol, in particular wine, can have some of those antioxidant effects that we've talked about. But again, too much of either chocolate or wine could be bad. Dark chocolate is always the right way to go. I personally, I think it's don't ask my parents. It's only 1 bar of dark chocolate in a jar of peanut butter a day. It's not 2 jars of peanut butter in a day. But I don't know anything specifically off my head on those. But now you've got me thinking, and I'm trying to remember of the studies that I've read. We could talk after for sure. Wait, in the back there.
When you talked about eating an egg a day, I've always been told don't eat the yellow because that would cause your cholesterol to go up. So are you
So I am so glad someone asked that question. It has been almost completely, I'm going to say completely debunked, that eggs are going to impact your cholesterol. And certainly don't get rid of the egg yolk, the yellow part. That is where most of the nutrient density is. You would have to eat 10 or 15 eggs a day in order to have any negative health impact there, especially on cholesterol. That would maybe just a really bad PR campaign there with eggs. Don't be afraid of eggs and cholesterol. But I will say, and I have to cover myself by saying this, always talk to your doctor about all of these things, right? But eggs are something very, very close and dear to me. I love eggs, and they are so good for you. If you just think about what an egg is, it is built to sustain life and help life grow. So, and a few eggs a day, not a bad idea. The formerly oldest living person in the world, she just died a few days ago, unfortunately, at 117 years old. She said her secret was eating 3 eggs a day. So, you know. Well, we'd all like to think we're outliers, right? I don't know if I'd want to live that long. Any other questions? Yeah, right.
I just wanted to ask about the billets that was listed on the slide with the causes of oxidation and free radicals. Is that more just from dysbiosis or
Trying to think.
an overgrowth of bad bacteria or those infections?
Here, let me. Oh! In that picture, I got confused. Yeah. So a change in the bacteria inside our body that a lot of bacteria are responsible for helping us get the nutrients or the nutrients to pull them out of our foods. And so I think what this is probably referring to here is a change in bacteria. Maybe, for example, the bacillus infection, a change in what maybe the microbiome could have an impact on how our body is processing nutrients or the addition of free radicals into our bodies. So it may be impacting the way that foods are being processed or the way our cells are functioning, causing an increase in oxidation. That's a great question. You're very attentive. Yeah.
Is DHEA good for the brain? How much of it do you need?
Say that again.
Is DHEA good for the brain?
You know, I don't know that off the top of my head. I'd have to look into that and get back to you on it. I'm not familiar immediately. That's a great question. Yeah, here.
I've heard that there are some foods that actually are harmful for promoting inflammation.
Mm-hmm. What those are? Sugar. Sugar may be the big example there. There are certain types of certainly processed grains and things like that promote inflammation, and it's also going to be dependent on the individual. How well an individual can process different foods and nutrients. But the food that comes to mind is our processed grains. We get a lot of processed foods in general, as well as dairy tends to be an inflammatory thing for a lot of people. But it just depends on the individual and what's going to be causing inflammation. Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Right here.
I noticed under your sources of free radicals, a major operation. So I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that example?
Yeah. So when your body is undergoing a major stressor, such as a major operation, you're getting a lot of cell metabolism going on, maybe damage to cells, and your body's natural processes of metabolism to work really hard to do that healing, that immune response, is going to create more free radicals. There's going to be more damage going on there. Yeah.
Is that a lasting effect?
Well, so So the cumulative effect of that could be harmful, but it all depends, again, on maybe your treatment immediately after that operation. Making sure you're eating healthy foods, maybe getting some more antioxidants in your diet immediately after you've had something major happen internally. That's a good question. Yeah.
You had a bar chart in there that talked about the recall and memory with the different additives that you think.
Oh, the lutein and DHA?
Okay, and you were talking about it as applied to aging, but would you also apply that to what children eat in the morning before they go to school, or if they have better nutrition, if they able to learn more?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
How does that deal with long-term intelligence or just today's test?
huh. I would say that this research probably originated in cognitive development and not in a cognitive aging method. I mean, the way our brains are working are very similar to in early life as opposed to late life. So the way things are coming online in early life are going to be very similar to the way that they're going offline in later life. So to answer your question, I mean, is this supplementation probably good in children as well? Yeah, absolutely. It's probably going to be influencing the same pathways and help that synergy is probably doing the same thing in a child's growing brain as an adult's brain while trying to continue to create those new connections.
So are school systems looking at their lunch programs and dietitians, do they know this stuff that they can make good choices?
Surely not enough, I can imagine, and need to be paying a lot more attention. And I know many in public health are certainly aiming to get that information out there and inform our school systems, but it's probably not well known enough, for sure, especially for our children in schools. A good, healthy diet can have a huge impact on a child's school performance. Thank you so much, everyone.